CCWD meeting today, Wednesday, September 17th, approximately 9:18. You take a roll call, Mona, please.
Yes, Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Stump.
Present.
President Ratterman.
Here.
Director Dean. And Director Dooley.
Here.
Okay, next we're on our agenda item 3, public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Any public comment? Okay, seeing none, move on. Item 4, reportable action from closed session. As I just indicated, we do not have any reportable action from our closed session this morning. Consent agenda. The following items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. Items will be acted upon by the board at one time, without discussion. Any board member may request that any item be removed for later discussion. 5A, approval of minutes for the board meeting of August 12, 2014. And 5B, ratify claim summary number 510, Secretarial Fund in the amount of $4,746,049.80 for August 2014.
Move for acceptance.
Second.
Any public comment on this item? Okay, no discussion. We got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Moving on to old business, nothing to report. We're on to item 7 in our agenda, new business. 7A, discussion action regarding support of Proposition 1, the Water Quality, Supply, and Infrastructure Improvement Act of 2014. Larry Diamond.
Want the short version?
Yes.
Aqua is calling upon all member agencies to adopt formal resolutions of support for Prop 1. And that's the action before the board.
Okay, I guess I need the long version.
Say it again.
I can go back.
Well, just say that sentence again. I don't think I got you.
Aqua is asking all member agencies to adopt formal resolutions of support for Prop 1, which is the Water Quality, Supply, and Infrastructure Improvement Act of 2014.
So moved. I have some questions, but go ahead.
Okay.
What's in it for Calaveras County?
You know, it's hard to say with regard to the specifics. I have a breakdown attached, a couple breakdowns attached, and they have a lot of different categories with money further split, but there is some money set aside for disadvantaged communities, for small community wastewater treatment, safe and affordable drinking water. So again, they're refunding those grant programs with which we've had some degree of success with over the years. So
Are they funding them at a level similar to what we've, because I know we've benefited pretty good from those in the past, but are they funding them at a level consistent with our success in the past?
I couldn't give you a comparison over prior bond issues like 84 or 50 or 204, but they say they're setting aside $260 million for wastewater, $260 million for drinking water under the disadvantaged communities category.
I think just the fact that disadvantaged communities are going to benefit from this, and we do have so many disadvantaged communities in this area, and we have been successful in getting money out of this pot. Prop 84 historically, Bill's been getting all grants for all kinds of stuff. I think this is something we could support. I definitely do support it.
Well, it's it's another huge debt for the state.
Yeah, it is.
And it does fund initial work on the tunnels.
I don't see tunnel funding here at all.
Nothing on the physical construction of the tunnels, but
Not even mentioned in there.
No.
I mean, that was a specific exclusion of the water bubble.
Storage, yes. Tunnels, no.
They're only, it's, the amount of this, bond that goes to, drinking water issues, or drinking and wastewater, utilities, is only 14.5%.
Yeah.
And if my calculation's right, and the, at 14.5% spread throughout the whole state, because you're only looking at $520 million out of 7.45 billion, or 5.4. Spread throughout the whole state is going to make it a real heck of a battle for money, and I don't know if we have that much more issues to, in the known disadvantaged communities, that we could benefit from right now. Because we've already accessed a number of disadvantaged communities for Douglas Flat and West Point. I know Bill's talked to me a little bit about trying to see if Forest Meadows can qualify. I don't know where that's going to fall down on, because that's going to be a real big issue as far as income versus wealth. A lot of the people have low incomes, but still have a fair amount of wealth. And if that's the case, it could qualify for disadvantaged community, but I'm not sure where it's going to fall off at.
This is not obligatory.
It's not what?
You're not obliged to vote in support of this measure.
I understand.
This was just something that Aqua and now CASA as well has joined in and asking its member agencies to support.
I'm concerned. I think no matter how hard we work at trying to get Calaveras County or any of the mountain counties perceived as a beneficiary that needs to be funded, we can't break that whole concept of strictly population or dollars and cents in terms of how the bond is formulated.
There's no regional important.
No.
Level.
Just because 60% of the state's water comes from here doesn't really seem to impact anyone that making those kind of decisions. We spent 2 years working on this bond, and from where we started to where we ended up, we got the short end of the stick. So it was almost like maybe if we wouldn't have done anything, we would have done better. But my biggest concern is right now how it looks as far as IRWM money. And for us, that has more to do with the McCollum than it does with the Stanislaus. So I'm disheartened by it, but this is a good thing for the state of California. I don't like bonds in particular because ultimately they do seem to take care of the really big projects like storage at this time. But there may be some potential. I'm meeting with Gary Bardini next week to see how it's going to affect Calaveras County, and I'm hopeful that at least he has some good news, or he can read between the lines so we have a better or a clear understanding of how we may be able to benefit with this bond. But I'm willing to support the bond, the concept of the bond, just because I think it's something necessary for California.
Well, I have a little bit of a different view. I think maybe the reason we have so many disadvantaged communities is because we have so damn many bonds. But I'm just frustrated because I see 260 million. You know, it's a big number, but not in the state of California, and I don't want. I mean, I generally support it like you do for the state because I love to see the storage in there. I think that's historic and it would be terrific, but. You know, in this case, I'm gonna vote local and I'm not gonna vote for it because I just don't want it to be unanimous. You know, I'd rather that at least if someone was paying attention that they recognize it. You know, our regional importance has got to be recognized at some point. You know, being the watershed and all the work that you guys have done to to highlight that just seems to go, falling on deaf ears, and that's frustrating to me, so. Anyway, that's my point.
California has I think a slight surplus of funds right now, which could evaporate overnight almost. And as it seems to historically do.
Only because they raise
historically.
taxes, though. That's the reason they have a surplus.
And it doesn't, this is going to have to be paid back by California, and this is going to be a huge negative impact if we fall into a deficit situation again, which I have no doubt will happen.
Eventually.
Okay, any further discussion up here? Any public comment on this item? Any action?
Was it? I thought there was a motion.
Okay. We already have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No,
3-2, Dennis and Jeff for the opposition. Passed 3-2. Okay. Thank you. New business, 7B, discussion action regarding rules and regulations governing the furnishing of water and/or wastewater services to consumers, amending Article 3, Section 21A1, application for responsibility for payment of service. Mr. Joel Metzger, Community/Customer Service Relations Manager.
Where's my full screen, Jeff? To get a full screen show. F5. There we go. I'm only getting one. You can follow along with me on your handout as well. It's the same information. We're bringing this back at your request. We've been working on this issue for quite some time in order to make sure that we make an educated decision that's backed by data. And if you'll just bear with me, I want to give you a brief summary so everyone's aware of how we got to where we are today. The background on this is in 2013, your board heard a presentation that informs you we're spending about $20,000 a year sending a courtesy paper copy of bills to secondary parties. And this could be usually a tenant, but also a property manager or anyone else that the property owner wanted to receive this courtesy copy. The $20,000 a year was presented as a cost that we could avoid. We also wanted to get out of the property management business and let the property owner interact with their tenant directly and figure out how that bill is going to be paid. And so the board heard this presentation and voted 4-1 to discontinue that practice, which ended up happening in April. But before we did discontinue sending these courtesy copies out to secondary parties, we made sure to notify everyone. So we were very careful to send out a written notice not only to the property owner, but also to the tenant and the property manager, whoever was receiving these secondary bills. Despite that communication, there was also something in the newspaper and on our website. We did have quite a few concerns raised based on this decision. That mainly came from property managers and tenants who somehow just hadn't looked at their bill and hadn't seen that written notice or didn't read the newspaper, and all of a sudden they weren't able to see their bill, and then a lot of them forgot to pay it, and they ended up getting a reminder notice and a door tag, and eventually some of these people even got locked off. And so a lot of these concerns came back to board members as well as staff, And for a period of time, we had a significantly higher number of calls related to this issue. That led me, when I came to work here, to take a hard look at this issue and first identify what options we did have in place in order to allow people to view their bills even if they aren't the property owner, but also to look at anything else that might be good to give everyone the option that they need in order to see this bill, and so we can make sure that they're having a good experience with CCWD. As part of this research process, we did talk about it in Finance Committee. We had Director Stump and President Ratterman there. We also had some property managers attend that Finance Committee meeting. And I was pleased to hear during that of the options I'm going to go through, most of the needs that people had expressed to us as, I can't do this, I can't do that, my person's not getting this. Most of them were met by options that people simply didn't know about. And I give Corinne and Tiffany huge credit for working very hard to talk to hundreds of people and inform them and walk them through these new processes. During that Finance Committee meeting, we came to the conclusion that there was one small section of people who weren't having their needs met, and that's someone who can't take advantage of an email bill, doesn't really want to call in, maybe they're not very mobile and they don't want to come in and pay their bill in person, and they really need that paper bill, and they want that. And so we came to the conclusion that we would bring before this board a recommendation for a fee that would cover our hard costs, and this isn't including staff time, we would send a courtesy copy for this administrative charge, and I'm going to give you some more details on that later. So we brought that idea back to the board at the last board meeting, and we got positive feedback from most of you. And so when I finish this, I'm going to ask you to take a vote on whether we're going to add this administrative charge in order to meet the needs of those few people. But before I do that, I want to make sure you're all clear on what we do offer in terms of allowing everyone to view their bills. So phone access is something most people take advantage of. You can call us when we're open, or you can call us when we're closed and leave a message with our answering service, and we'll call you back the next day. We'll tell you when your bill is due, how much it is, how much water you've been using, whatever you want. Online access, you can...
Hold on one second. Did you say you'll call them back the next day?
So if someone called after hours, as soon as we get in, we check the messages first thing, and those calls go in the morning for sure.
Okay.
Online access, and also Director Davidson, if it comes in the day of, before we go home, we return every single phone call to make
Great.
sure that they get a same day call back if they called during open hours. Online access, once you have created an account using the owner's name and account number, you can see all kinds of great graphing data on your water use. You can pay your bill. You can even, in the next couple of months, set up an automatic credit card to pay that. You can also sign up for ACH, which is an automatic withdrawal. A lot of good information there. The email notifications is next on the list, and that is what has really been the main solution to this problem. Once you create an account as an owner or a tenant using that information, you can add an unlimited number of email addresses to that account, and we will, without a charge, send that bill out to a tenant, a property manager, a brother, a sister, a friend, whoever that owner wants to receive that, will send that bill for free. And I would say more than 90% of our people who were affected by this change are using this option, and they're very happy with it, including property managers.
That includes, with what you just said right there, that's got to include a savings to us for sending out paper bills for those 90% of, are you focusing on just tenants and property managers on that 90%? Or is that now 90% of our customers are receiving their bills by email?
These are just the people who were impacted by the change in our procedure in not sending the courtesy copy out. However, I think that e-bills is a fantastic option, and it should be where we're moving in the future. So when we're having conversations with people, we're encouraging them to take advantage of this option. At this point, we don't offer a paperless option. However, I'm looking to be able to completely eliminate paper if that's what our customer wants.
So the email is an addition to the paper copy that goes somewhere?
The owner always gets that paper copy.
Okay.
We will always send that to the owner. There is one option which would change that, which I'm going to go over in just a minute here.
Okay.
So yeah, of the people affected, most are taking advantage of the email bills. Again, in person is a really easy way. Not many people do that. You can come in and we'll give you all the information and let you pay your bill that way. So a tenant could do that. The final option that was in place when this policy change took effect is the owner can send us a form that updates their mailing address and other information. So they can say, my mailing address is now where my tenant lives, it's not where I live. And while that does get the paper bill to the tenant, if the tenant leaves, then the owner is not informed of what's going on with their account, and it does create some issues. And so I've been cautioning people that this doesn't come without issues, so make sure you think through those before you say, my new mailing address is where my tenant lives. Another way to...
But can they do that and then the landlord can get an email?
And that's what we're recommending. If you are going to change it, go ahead and sign up for e-bills, and that way everyone knows what's going on.
Yeah, that's good.
So these were the options that were in place, but again, we did have some people who don't use computers. A lot of them are senior citizens, and they don't really want to drive over here, and they're just not thinking about the phone. They like to get that bill, that's what they're used to. They've been doing this for 40 years, and they wanted that bill. If the owner isn't willing to do the change of address, we all, as the finance committee and me personally, believe we needed to offer an option to get them that additional copy of the paper bill. And so that's why I'm going to recommend that your board approves this administrative charge to give them that option. But again, before we take the vote, I wanted to give you a little bit of the impacts on this. In April, May, and June, this is right after the change took place, we did have a significant increase in calls. I mean, it was noticeable, maybe 20, 30 a day, people very upset about this change. Again, I give Corinne and Tiffany huge credit for what they've done to be patient with these people, and if the person didn't understand how to sign up, they would sign up for them for these e-bills. Since then, I'd say within the last month or two, the calls have dropped off significantly. In fact, this week I haven't answered any questions about this particular issue, which tells me that we're getting through to our customers and they're starting to figure out how to use these new options. But to look at it using some data, the second handout looks like this. This is a really good sheet. This keeps track of reminder notices, keeps track of door tags, and it keeps track of lock-offs. And the way that works is, if you haven't paid your bill, let's say we send the bill out to you on the 25th, it's due about the 19th of the next month. If you haven't paid it at that point, we'll send you a reminder notice, which comes with a fee. If you still don't pay that reminder notice plus your bill, in another week we go and put a door tag on the physical address on the door saying you're going to get locked off within 48 hours. Now we give them more than 48 hours, we usually give them about a week. If they still haven't paid, then we will go and physically turn off their water. Each of these processes comes with a fee, but it's also a good way to track how well customers are understanding what their bill is and how well they're paying it. And so if you look at cycle one, which is the west end of the county, Copperopolis, Valley Springs, Jennyland area, in August we had 1,287 reminder notices sent out. As opposed to June, which is the last 2-month billing cycle, it was 2,374. That's more than 1,000 reduction, which is huge. And I think that there's a strong correlation between our outreach efforts on these new options and this drop in reminder notices. Now that translates to, in cycle one, we only locked off 44 people, and in the cycle before we locked off 68. In door tags on that same cycle, we had 1,287 reminder notices, 395 door tags issued, down to 44 lock-offs. All these numbers are coming down. So we saw a brief spike in most of these numbers right after this change took place, and then everything's coming back down. And I think as we monitor this over the next 6 months, we're going to see these numbers come down even more. Because a lot of times, a lot of people are using their email even more than they're checking their mail, and I think it's going to help us get people signed up for auto pay. It's going to help them get the information they need and be more responsible about paying their bill. So I hope I can bring back this data to you over the next 6 months and continue seeing this downward trend. So that's the data that backs up what I believe is happening here. I think that we made a good decision here, but I would like to reach these few people who still need this paper bill for a small administrative charge. And so I hope that you've taken a look at the resolution that we've prepared, and I'd like to ask you to approve this today as a staff recommendation.
I move we approve this resolution.
I'll second.
Well, I want to thank you guys for this work. I do think that we've done a good job of the people who have called are getting good answers and some good solutions, and I appreciate the hard work customer service has done. I don't like the administrative charge. In fact, what I would rather do is give an incentive, because I do agree that what we want to encourage people to go onto either a auto check pay or some form of automatic payment online. I think that we should perhaps go the opposite way, and instead of charging the $15, give them a $15 discount for a one-time hookup. Or at least I'd like to see us maybe do a push where we say, hey, for the next 6 months, if you'll sign up for auto pay, because just as it cost us supposedly this $20,000 to send out these extra bills, it's saving us something on the other side. And that's really where we want to drive people. We want to drive people to be, because it's efficient for them, it's efficient for us, because the water bill eventually always gets paid. You know, late or locked off or whatever, it gets paid. And it's just so much more efficient for both sides if it's an automatic payment. And so while I'm not pushing for the automatic payment solution here today, I'd like to see us think about perhaps a 6-month period where we go out and promote and we give them something back for doing that. We figure out what the efficiency is to us, and we pass it along to our consumer in that route. But I don't agree with the $15. I just don't think it's.
I think we're talking two different things here when Director Davidson brings this up. I think in charging the extra $15 is the $15 that it has been charging us to do that extra fee there. I agree with Director Davidson 100% that maybe the next step is to bring all our other customers, which is where I was going a few minutes ago, bring our other customers into the fold and give them that $15 incentive that it cost us to send them their bill. But I think we're talking two different things here. We were sending two people bills, which was costing us that extra $15 per year per customer. And so we can get that back if those customers still want that. But I think a second prong approach, a new thing going forward, would be to do what Director Davidson is suggesting, is to contact all of our customers countywide and allow them to not get a paper bill. Allow us to save that $15 a year of sending out paper bills to everybody every month or every other month in this case. Save that $15 and give it back to them, and that would be an awesome incentive to reduce. It's going to reduce staff time and labor on working on that. But on this particular one, I think where it does cost us a separate fee, which is what we started addressing this close to a year ago now, and it was costing us a lot more calls. I think we've got that figured out now, and I think this is a great solution, and I applaud the work that our customer service department has done, but with your leadership, Joel, and through this process and gaining this information.
I just wanted to raise a check, however you want to call it, to address the possibility. You had mentioned earlier in your presentation the fact that we essentially had done some of the roles that a property manager had done with regard to addressing order issues with tenants and landlords and things like that. And we've seemed to have corrected that problem. However, if for some reason these things occur again, albeit on a much smaller scale, I would like some consideration made that we give an allowance for a certain amount of management, and at some point in time when it begins to become a little bit more onerous or certainly more costly, that we consider putting in policy a fee that they would have to pay for the hourly rate that was incurred in addressing these issues that wouldn't necessarily have to have been addressed. Now, that would be something that we look at down the road, but it's something to flag and be aware of.
I can bring back some data on that for you so you can consider based on the numbers. I expect it to be very low because the email option's been so successful.
I would hope it would be non-existent or even minimal, but I just, again, when Lynn brought up the issue of the additional $20,000 a year in cost for this service that we were providing, that's a lot of money for our district. And I would like, in in the spirit of that same kind of thing, to be able to recover some costs where we faced with, as I said, similar but maybe fewer situations in the future.
Okay, Don and Dennis.
First, I want to compliment staff because I've been monitoring this real close. Part of Finance Committee, I was really anxious to see directly from the folks that answer the phones what was actually occurring. So they've done an outstanding job. I'm impressed with how they've gone way beyond what our expectations would be. Second thing I wanted to talk about was this form. I asked for it, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and I use this form heavy. I mean, this is really a good tool for me. I watch it real close. Next question, and this is moving forward. I don't know if you have this capability. One of our biggest customer service, and I had it last Saturday, was that nobody can get a person when they call here. And we've wrestled with this for a long, long time. I would be curious now that our call volume is dropping off, if there's part of our phone system or something that would keep track of how many calls do not get answered, and we can have the same kind of report showing we're getting 10 a day, 7 a day, 50 a day, whatever that is, so we can start monitoring if that's getting better, if that's getting worse, or if that's staying the same, so we can try and start calculating how we can reduce this as much as possible. I would love, when I was in business, the rule in my company was the phone does not ring twice. Somebody has to pick it up. Even if it's Dawn, somebody has to pick that phone up before that second ring. And that's huge for customer service. I mean, customers calling in, actually talking to a person on the first ring, people are blown away by that concept. So I recognize that isn't going to happen next week, but I'd really like to be moving in that direction. If we can monitor it, we can measure it, then we can see what's actually occurring in there. So if that's possible, I'd like to start seeing that, and I don't even know if it's possible.
I couldn't agree more that that is a huge aspect of customer service, and I am monitoring the calls. We have a somewhat antiquated software to do that, and I'm looking for ways to break that down even more by how many were answered, how many went to message machine. What I can get is the number of calls that came into our department, and then which customer service rep answered them. So I will work on preparing a more detailed report, and I can bring that back to the board.
Thank you.
A couple of points. On the last paragraph on this page 2 of the ordinance, they have said in order to get this added to it, you have to fill out the form and bring a copy of an improved building permit. Now, would that be for a new building, or would that be for any building, even if you have one that's been lived in for 50 years?
To sign up for this service,
Yes.
all you would need to do is fill out a form, which I prepared, which says you understand that even though your tenant is receiving a copy of the bill, you are still fully responsible as the property owner. Sign that off and give us that, and then someone needs to, it's gonna be added to their account, that $15 administrative charge. So whether it's the tenant or the owner, someone's gonna be responsible for that charge. You won't need a building permit or anything like that.
Okay, well, you have a comment or a phrase in here saying that to bring in a copy of the approved building permit. On the second and third line on that section 21A1 on page 2 of the resolution. And I just had a question on that. I don't know why you need a building permit if the house has been existing for numerous years.
It's to establish new services.
Okay, so it doesn't apply to an existing building, only to new service.
Correct.
Okay, it doesn't say that. You might want to clarify that. Secondly, and you may have just answered this, but I don't know whether it's obvious or not. The $15 per year is that a one-time charge, or is that $1.25 every month?
It's a one-time charge.
Okay, so it's to be established who pays for that, the tenant or the owner, or just the owner?
It will be added to the account, and then it will be between the owner and their tenant to determine who would pay for that.
So it'll have to be paid, but it doesn't specify who has to pay it.
Correct.
Okay. And then finally, what about apartment buildings and shopping centers where tenants are billed separately? Are they, or each service is billed separately? How would you establish, is there going to be an ability for this to be added to the bill? Would that be for the entire apartment or building complex, or would it be for each individual connection?
We're basing this on the cost of sending those additional bills out to one additional person. So for each person you want to receive a copy, it would be added to the account with $15.
Okay, so if you had a 10-unit apartment building, it would be $150.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just wondering if that should be spelled out somehow in this ordinance or resolution.
I think my understanding is the way it's written is it refers to an individual secondary party, and that if you wanted to do more, then you would have to pay that in addition. But we could look at that language if you would like and make sure that that's very, very clear.
Well, I'm just asking for a question. I'm not necessarily saying that it must be done, but I did have that question reading it, that and the one on the building permit, that it's not clear that that applies to new services.
Well, that's applicable upon application for service, a building permit requirement. The entire sentence says, service shall be furnished only upon written application signed by the owner of the property along with the copy of an approved building permit. So it's at the time you are applying for service.
And actually, Dennis, if you, in the previous document in your packet shows what section A1 of the current policy, which is called Application for Service Rates and Billing, the way it reads there, that sentence makes more sense with the title above it. In the resolution, it just has that section pulled out, and it doesn't flow as well through the page. But if you go to the
Covers
policy.
both instances. The ordinance does.
What's that?
It covers application and billing. So they're separate issues, but they're mentioned in the same
Right.
ordinance.
And it does say the $15 annual fee will be charged for the account of the legal division of the property.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the dais? Any public comment on this item?
I just, before I vote no, I just want to thank you guys for because I really, I mean that.
Came here with a
But the one thing I want to, what I hope is that we'll actually do a little bit of, promoting on this and through our website or through the, but I think it would be, even though I think people are generally overall satisfied personally, I think this left a bitter taste in it was a black eye for the district. And I think what we've done is going to be way more manageable for our customers, but I'd like to see some repair done. And so I think we can do that by promoting this as all the new options, and then also kicking it forward to, because I get this all the time, whether it's from my insurance or something. I mean, people, if you go paperless, you'll do yourself, you'll do the district, you'll do the environment some good, and that's where we want to steer them anyway. So I'd like to see us continually to promote that, and then to think of come up with some good solution as to maybe, for the lack of a better term, well, just a promotion of some of these items like auto pay that are good for everybody, that'll keep costs down for everybody. And I think we'll go a long way toward public relations if we do that, so.
Absolutely. And we'll be sending out something within the next 2 months regarding auto credit card, and we could include that language in there.
Okay.
One more thing,
Well,
Scott.
I suspect that a lot of people are, I tell my wife, her parents came from Azores, and she's so cheap. I said, Scottish been dropping by there for hundreds of years, and I think they're more Scottish than Portuguese. And the point is that I believe this will drive a lot of the people to choose to figure out how to go paperless.
Yeah.
It's a great move going forward. Don, one more thing?
One more thing. One of the things that I've learned by talking to your staff, that I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but the vast majority of these people are the same people, billing period after billing period after billing period. So we take a small percentage that we're trying to work with here that are causing these issues. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to fix that. Staff doesn't seem to think that that's going to be fixable. No matter how we work with them, we're still going to have a certain percentage that will, every time they get a bill, they're not going to be able to pay it. And that's disturbing to me. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to recommend a fix for that. But just recognizing that, I'm just lost with it, because they end up paying every time
More.
a huge amount of money,
Yeah.
and they can't get off that track.
Plus all
So,
the fines and fees that come along.
oh yeah, it's huge. They're probably ending up paying on a regular basis twice as much as their water bill.
Well,
And
one thing that
that's crazy in my mind.
One thing that I've thrown out before is that the 2-month bill is a large chunk, and and some of the money that they've gotten paid, people that get paid weekly, some of that money that was for that 2-month bill when it does come, and it's both sewer and water for some people, and 2 months on top of that. It is a large bill, and some people get paid 6-7 times to pay for that, for those weeks that go into that 2-month bill, and don't have the wherewithal to save it, or the just being organizational skills to budget for it. And I do think if there's something to be done on the 2-month cycles, if we can ever do something on that and break that down into, at least make it optional, or have a service where you can pay a portion of your bill online and not actually maybe receive an email.
That's an interesting concept, because if we run an auto pay, why would we care if it came in monthly?
No, we
Because the
wouldn't.
reason we're on a double billing cycle is economics, right?
Reading the meters.
Reading the meters, and then, so if we, that's just something to keep in the back of your head, because if we were on the auto, it would be better for us to get money monthly, if we didn't have to go collect it by sending out bills and then processing.
If people
It's
went
just
to,
something to think about,
if
because
people
it
went
might
to
be
elect-
another incentive to,
if they went to an electronic bill, it wouldn't cost us anything to push that button to send an email out to them twice a month, if they wanted to break it down into that small increments. Just
Right.
options.
We accept payment anytime. Well, if you pay us in advance, or you double pay us, you just simply get a credit. So if someone could be more disciplined if they paid monthly, they can certainly do that even right now.
well, but what I'm saying is, when you bring back the solution, maybe one of the options that we can give some of these people is to, if they go to auto payment, is to go on a monthly schedule as opposed to every other month. And that might be helpful to them.
I'll look into that.
Okay, we get back on topic here. We got a motion and a second. All discussion has been exhausted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Just me.
Director Davidson
On a roll today, Jeff.
is very negative today.
It's not like me.
Okay, passes 4-1. Davidson dissenting.
I think this is the
Okay, on to item 8,
meeting that you said.
committee reports. Do you have any committee reports? Thank you, Joel.
I'm not even running for
Any committee meetings that we had recently? Engineering, no, finance hasn't done anything.
We had a
the engineering meeting.
hearing committee meeting last week, was it, Jeff?
Last Wednesday.
Oh, okay, and You want to give a report on it? I don't think that we really came up with anything.
Well, no, we had a couple of issues regarding meters, existing meters, and there are an abundance of meters out there, not an abundance, but there are a handful of meters out there that we may or may not know about, and that we, typically, if there's a meter on a lot, those people should be paying into our system. That's our standards, but there are some meters that probably predate that. So we asked staff to take a look at maybe starting to identify those meters that exist and notifying the property owners that if they want the meter to be active, they have to pay into our system as per our regulations, and then maybe give them a time frame for either to get in the system or we will collect the meter. So it's pretty complicated, and the circumstances are going to differ, but and we also talked again about transferring. There are some people that bought sewer and water service that want to abandon it, that don't want to pay the bills, and we're trying to give them an option to perhaps transfer that to a different lot or different parcel in the same service area, and so they could reclaim some of the value, but then not have to pay into the system if they have no need to have that, because it is an asset to their lot, but only if they're going to plan on using it. So anyway, those are the things we discussed.
Any other committee meetings? Okay. Mokelumne River Wild and Scenic Designation. One of you two, anything going, Mr.?
Basically, a financial discussion.
Okay.
Amador Water made us aware that they've incurred costs in excess of $130,000 in the recent effort regarding the wild and scenic legislation. And they have put out a request to other partnering entities about consideration of those entities in contributing towards those costs. That's just kind of left hanging out there. There was not a formal cost-sharing arrangement in place during that period. I understand that a number of the other entities whose interests may have been represented by Amador were not involved in steering the level of effort or control of expenses or anything of that nature. But Amador has put forward a request for consideration by those entities if they would be willing to share in some of those costs. So that's one side of the equation. The other is moving forward, Amador is looking toward some proactive activities in anticipation of the resurgence of wild and scenic interest in legislation. They anticipate legal and lobbying costs will be incurred, and so they've proposed a cost-sharing agreement for consulting services, lobbying, public affairs, and legal. And aligning with that, they've put out a draft cost allocation percentage among potential interested partners. That's on the second page of my memo. And this is very preliminary. I know that future costs for those activities have not been determined. So under financial considerations, I'm stating simply that anticipated that a budget cap and cost-sharing agreement will be established by this group at some point in the future and brought back to the board for approval. And we also would need to identify a funding source to contribute towards those activities if and when those costs start to be incurred. Would you like to start with the first item?
Yeah, and what is your recommendation on the first item?
Well-
The two items being the past and the future, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that is how it works. I don't have a breakdown from Amador on the lump sum. I'm sure they'd be able to provide that if we need additional detail. If I use the cost allocation percentage that they proposed looking forward, and again, that's a draft percentage based upon anticipated partnership among interested entities. I used their 28.22% CCWD share on 130,000 and come out with over $36,000 in expenses that I have no budget for.
Is the 130,000, is that just purely legal expense? Or what is it made up of?
I don't have a breakdown.
Okay.
They've presented that, or represented it as an estimate of their costs at that point in time incurred towards that effort. And they didn't think they'd seen the final bills for that effort at that point in time either, that it would actually run considerably in excess of that.
Is this for what has already been paid?
Yes, by Amador.
So they're, because when I read this, I thought I was seeing basically for the future, but this is for...
Well, there's two aspects to this. One is that they've made a request for consideration for certain entities, public agencies that felt represented by these efforts to contribute towards those previously incurred expenses. And the other was just kind of a heads up to the board that we anticipate if we have the same level of involvement, we're going to incur some expenses. Amador has thrown out a cost allocation percentage. It's not cast in stone. There is no agreement yet. It's a heads up to all of these interests, such as CCWD, that there may be additional expenses incurred in the future. But yeah, there's looking forward and looking back.
Well, can we even approve this without a budget adjustment?
I think you'll need a budget adjustment.
Pardon?
I think you will need a budget adjustment because, to my understanding, there's Jeff way back there. None of this was in the budget. And the expenses going forward, I'm not sure when or how much will be incurred, so really can't speak definitively to the budget.
Mr. President, if I may, in regards to what Larry mentioned about whether it being a budgeted item is correct, we do not have it as a budgeted item per se. Whether we're looking past or moving forward, Larry also mentioned we don't have a final invoice yet. And what we're looking at is conceptually if we can go ahead and take a look at this and only pay it upon final invoice and review of those charges. At this particular point in time, if you wish to go ahead and authorize payment upon receipt of invoice, we can go ahead and do that and true up the budget at mid-year, because it's not going to affect us until that point. Plus, we should at that point have a better idea of where we are on going forward.
Don?
I'm not excited about paying this until we have a line item expenditure from Amador Water. If they say it costs this much, that doesn't mean anything to me. I need to know what we're going to be supporting. So as far as I'm concerned, doing that is premature. So I'm not ready to do that until they provide us with something. And moving forward, from what I understand, this is basically the UMRA split concept, where each member of the UMRA, each UMRA member is paying a determined percentage amount towards this. So I've had conversations with a couple of different agencies, and they seem to be supportive, but I'd really like to see something from every agency saying that they're supportive before we get on board with the split and find out that 2 or 3 agencies are not going to step up, and our percentage is actually greater than what we anticipated. So this may be a little bit premature at this time, other than the concept of how does the board feel about past costs and forward costs if those occur.
Understood. If I may interject here, obviously we don't pay anything until we actually see the invoice, and it may be, so you're right, it could be very premature. I wanted to give the board that option. We can always bring this back when the actual bill comes to us, and it can also be at that point where all the parties look at a cost share agreement that not only looks at the past, but the future and negotiates that so we have an agreement in place. Because there's still a lot of work to do, not only on accumulating the past bills, but also reconciling this cost sharing agreement.
Okay.
How is it that, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say this, when this whole thing came down, it was, to say the least, something of a surprise. And I just didn't agree with Amador's style. It was kind of the Chicken Little approach to correcting a problem. They just threw everything at it they possibly could, generated a lot of expenses, and you could say they did or they didn't accomplish anything since 1199 was put in suspense, but the bottom line is that, you know, going forward, I don't know that I agree that we need to work with their attorney, that we need to work with their lobbyist, that we need to deal in an open-ended situation where we don't know the costs are going to be. There hasn't been, except I understand yesterday or the other day, there was a meeting over at Amador among different agencies, but there really hasn't been anything presented in an open manner that can be discussed. Now, I'm going to throw out an idea that might be a possible option, and that is Cameron's meeting this afternoon, and all of the agencies, upcountry agencies who have had an interest in the issue of the wild and scenic are members of that particular group. What is also interesting is that ever since I've been at CCWD, and we're going on 9 years, that particular organization has had in its coffers approximately $40,000 of unexpended funds. It was collected for some reason which I've forgotten, and it's been sitting in there. And it would seem to me that before we start spending our own money, that we might want to consider possibly putting together some kind of a work plan through camera to address the issues of this wild and scenic issue. Since we've already paid into it many, many years ago, let's utilize some of that money instead of our own money, which we really don't have a lot of at the moment. So I think that would be a way to go. Now, it's possible that one of the conclusions that would come out of camera would be that this is a process that would be better promoted by UMRA, the Upper McCollum River Watershed Authority, and possibly even bring in the interests of the people down in San Joaquin through Moquise. But I think we have an opportunity to discuss it, and if it's possible, use some of the already collected funds in the camera treasury to address some of these issues. So that's it.
Dennis?
I'm basically, my understanding of what was spent was to have some legal analysis on how to lobby the state on adding corrections to this wild and scenic issue. And also I have questions on how is it that East Bay Mud, being a member of UMRA, well, they're not? Okay, I thought they were.
UMRA, yeah.
Huh?
I'm a member of UMRA.
Not camera.
Not camera, but UMRA. He said UMRA.
Yeah, so, well, if they're a member of UMRA, and this is, huh?
Yeah, they are a member of UMRA.
But not camera.
But how is it, as a member of UMRA, they could choose not to participate in this when this has an impact on them, I think?
They haven't said that.
They haven't said that they
They're
will.
sitting in the catbird seat because the East Bay Mud staff analysis was that any wild and scenic designation on McCollum, given where it's located, will probably benefit them rather than harm them. So they can kind of sit back there and sort of smile and know that whatever happens is going to be fine with them.
This idea doesn't leave a great taste in my mouth, the way it's set up right now with the money. Let's go, they decided to go spend some money and their own idea and hired attorneys, spent it, studied it, and then, afterwards, come to us. And I'm not quite sure that we have the same interest and the same items at risk, that we're in the exact same position as, and I'd like to have that looked at before we make a decision on this on this too, as to what do they have at risk versus us, in looking at, well, it was Senate Bill 1199, but the wild and scenic going forward, that if it does happen, the potential harm or damage that it could do to that county versus this county, I think is much different, from what I understand. And and so the risk is a little bit different, and it might have more. I think they have a greater incentive to spend on something like this than we do. And so I would like to have some comments on that when this does come back. Is this breakdown, this percentage breakdown, is that common to UMRA?
Yeah, that's their pattern.
I think the only difference in our reason for doing this is time. I think the reasons are exactly the same. While Amber County may have a more urgent need for water, there's no question that we'll have a need for water, particularly in your district, down the Highway 12 corridor, in the not so near future, but it isn't that far off. I think Amador County really carried the weight on this. Of course, we had our own expenses. We attended meetings. We went to Oakland. We certainly absorbed cost also. So that has to be looked at. I do think we need to have a discussion about how this was, who it was billed out to, and what their purpose was. But I don't know that that's going to be a public document. I doubt if it would be a public document. It's we have to think about that. But I certainly absolutely endorse doing some form of cost sharing and staff sharing, whether it's with Mr. Cronick or their lobbyist or whomever. They did an amazing job and brought forth some. Quite honestly, there would probably be a Wild and Scenic right now had the Conservancy just allowed us the language changes that they worked so hard on. So I think it was really a failure on the Conservancy's part of not trying to work with us in Amador County to accomplish this. It's really a shame. Now we're getting ready. We could spend another $100,000, probably will. I'll certainly vote to spend it, because I don't think there's anything more important than making sure that we can have a project on the McCollum. That's where I stand. I agree that we have to look into finer details. I want to talk with our attorney about where those details, whether or not those details are public or should be or not. I just think that there's, in the back of my head, there's some issues as to whether or not that it's attorney-client privilege. And so, I want those issues addressed, but I absolutely will support a budget adjustment in the future to do cost sharing with Amador County and Jackson Valley Irrigation and CCWD of some sort, because it's in my 14 years here, I don't think there's ever been anything that threatened us more than the way that they proposed Wild and Scenic. I think we could live with Wild and Scenic designation if they would compromise with us. But as they continue to say that they're not going to compromise, then I think we need to be prepared to do what we can to preserve the water for the people of Calaveras County. So,
Bless you, Dawn.
As the other ad hoc committee member with Jeff on this issue, I have to say, nobody's fault, but we rode on the coattails of Amador. In reality, if it would have been a year ago or something in the past, we would have been leading the charge rather than following in Amador's footsteps. But because of staffing issues and other issues that happened at CCWD, we were left in the position of just being kind of a supporter. And I agree with Jeff that this is a critical issue for the future of Calaveras County. For us to not be involved, I think would be a huge mistake. I know that it did use a huge amount of time. Jeff and I spent I can say literally hundreds of hours on this. This was a big deal. In my mind, we got very, very lucky.
Yeah.
It was just, I mean, it was this close.
But it's important to realize that we spent time where we should have really had a professional staffer there, and we just didn't have the staff to do it. And I
And
mean,
that's no reflection on our staff, it's as a reflection on how thin we are at CCWD. We've got the professional people, but they're doing 40 things right now. But we have to be looking into the future, saying, how are we going to protect Calaveras County? And this is a critical thing. But like I said earlier, we need to do this right. And whatever that is, I'm not exactly sure, but it's got to be done and done properly.
so my recommendation, if you want one, is to talk with their general manager, talk with our attorney about, because, I mean, we don't want to ask somebody to produce something that they feel is attorney-client privilege, because it'll become a public document. So discuss that with our attorney, find out where we stand in regards to that. But obviously, I mean, because during this whole process, they never ask us for anything. You know, that's the one thing I think is important. They would have done it without us. We, I think, definitely had a benefit. So while I'm, the stuff about the past, I don't know how we can resolve that. Probably won't be able to resolve it perfectly to their satisfaction. But on the other hand, we should have had a staffer there, and we relied on their staff greatly. There's no question in my mind that we would have had a staffer full-time. If we had, water resources staff level guy on or person on, that person would have been working pretty well full-time, at least during that process. We would have paid them. And so while I'm not for telling them no on what they've spent in the past, I want to come up with a reasonable breakdown of that. And I definitely want to put money in a kitty to, just as we do with any, it's unfortunate that our biggest threat to our water is our Board of Supervisors. It's really frustrating to me that that's the case. But we've always suspected that we would have to defend our water rights. We are, and we need to, even if we just start budgeting a small amount annually, we should have that in our budget for these things that pop up. Because I think this will pop up again.
Okay, any further comment? We're not taking any action on this today. Doesn't sound like no action's needed. Any public comment on this item, item 9A? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, on to following along in the agenda, item 10, legislative update. Anything on?
Oh, just kind of a rehash. The conclusion of the groundwater legislation, SB 1168, 1319, and AB 1739, as I think all the boards were, was signed into law. Governor Brown, in his statement, cautioned that years of disagreements and arguments are ahead in implementing the new laws that take effect in January. It's supposed to target areas where groundwater basins are being depleted faster than being replenished. Give local land planners 2 years to create a groundwater sustainability agency, which in turn has up to 5 years to develop a plan for managing wells and pumping. The state board can step in and develop plans for communities that don't abide by the new laws. Other than that, I still have a lot of broad statements out there. I do not have implementation language. I can't tell you the specific impacts, financial or otherwise, here yet, and that may take some time.
Let me ask you this. We a while back established that we were the groundwater authority, or did we not?
Over the portion of the eastern San Joaquin groundwater basin extending in Calaveras County, we did file a...
Just the San Joaquin Basin, not the countywide?
No, it's specific.
So we're not
to
on the
that
hook.
70, 80 square miles of recognized state-designated groundwater basin in the West County.
So we're not on the hook to get into the well monitoring business, excluding that area.
That's my understanding at this point, but whether or not we get pulled into some degree of planning, monitoring, or whether the county gets saddled with it. I have to wait for the implementation language.
So, let me just add one more. So with the county, I mean, are you understanding that, you know, like for instance, Valley Springs PUD, we do have one water system on Wells, Wallace.
Yeah.
But how many other agencies in, well, I mean, there's a lot of wells in the county that are, so would the county then would they oversee like Valley Springs PUD? Is that what, or is the authority for the county to oversee these other agencies?
It's my understanding that I'm sorry, go ahead, Larry.
I'm not certain yet about their threshold criteria, which wells have to be monitored. And then where does the dividing line between CDPH versus a groundwater sustainability agency stop and start? I don't know that those have been clearly defined yet.
And I think each local community could be much different than the next. This county could be set up much different than Fresno County said.
Oh, yeah,
It's
I think
local, a lot of local,
Yeah, I
and
think
it hasn't been devised yet as to what we're going to do in Calaveras County.
What a mess.
The legislate, all three of the bills that came out, they focused almost totally on the groundwater basins. And they're using the counties as the basin managers.
So I understand.
And of those basin managers, if they don't come up with a plan, then they have to eat the state plan that'll step up and take care of business. Ultimately, I would like to see the county take over CASGen so we don't have to play that game. Ultimately, because that's a cost to us that we shouldn't be doing. If the county's gonna play groundwater, they should be playing with the groundwater basin, and we shouldn't be having to be the entity that monitors it. I do, like everyone else in Calaveras County, I do fear the concept that at some point, the state's going to say, all groundwater affects the basins. And at that point, then they'll start looking at like Valley Springs or anybody else.
Well,
that
Valley
has a hole in
Springs
the ground.
is in the San Joaquin Basin, actually, now that I think
If
about
it
it.
is, then they're going to be responsible for it.
Yeah.
But the counties are taking the tact. If you look at Sacramento and what the counties are saying, is they're seeing this as dollars and cents. They see how they can make money by playing this game.